How's everyone doing, folks? Welcome to the Pigskin preview. Mr. Mancini is working, doing some in the field work. So this is a recorded edition of the show. It might be at a different time or place than you usually find it, but as always, we plan on doing the show every Tuesday, rain or shine, Mancini or no. So if you are listening to this as a recorded show on the Mancini Network on Blog Talk Radio. Please, you can check out this show and others like it at Spreaker.com/NuckPods. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook at NuckPods. And you can find us as far as email is concerned at knuckleheadpods@gmail.com. If you are listening to us on the Knucklehead Network on Spreaker or Twitter, you can listen to us every Tuesday on the Blog Talk Radio Network. That's blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports. So, in this time of this kind of break between camps and all the stuff that's going on, when we are always talking about people getting arrested and all this other negative stuff, this is going to be a show specifically about football and about next year and about what we've seen so far. Kind of a refreshing change of pace. And we're going to talk about an article that we all read on ESPN that we enjoyed, where it talked about 5 teams that made the playoffs last year. Every year there's 4 to 5 teams that get knocked out that were former playoff teams, and then that means obviously there's got to be some new teams that jump in. So we're looking at 5 teams that could possibly get knocked out, 5 teams that could take their place. According to this article, we're going to break down the teams that they thought of. After that, we're going to talk about a couple of teams that we think maybe the article missed. And we're going to kind of break down each of these teams and where they're at and why we agree or disagree. So tonight we actually have the whole crew except for Mr. Mark Mancini. So let's start off with Mr. Hirsch. How you doing, sir? What's going on with you today?
I'm doing fine. I'm anxious to get started breaking down this ESPN article. I think it's very interesting. And also what I think it highlights here is the parity in the NFL, which I really enjoy. I like the salary cap scheme. I like the fact that you never know which team is going to rise up or which one's going to fall. So I'm looking forward to tonight's show. I think it's going to be interesting for everybody.
All right, well, I'll introduce our third co-host here by saying the first team that we're going to talk about that has a chance to make it into the playoffs is going to be the Baltimore Ravens. And, of course, we have Mr. Baltimore Blaine with us. So I'm going to quickly break down what the article says, talking about health of Joe Flacco, more weapons at the wide receiver core. They've added Michael Crabtree, they've added John Brown, they added Willie Snead, and then hopefully they're not going to have one of those unbelievably disastrous strings of injuries that they seem to have at the beginning of every season. So to give a little more of an in-depth breakdown, Baltimore Blaine, what do you think about your guys getting back to playoffs?
So far, so good. No injuries reported. Yes. I want to say, by the way, that I have not been arrested or failed any drug tests in the off season so far. Thank you. But back to the Ravens.
I would knock on some wood if I were you.
You know me too well. Back to the Ravens. Yes, they have on paper improved their receiving core. They've lost Mike Wallace, Jeremy Maclin, Danny Woodhead, and have added Michael Campanaro, and they've added Willie Snead and Michael Crabtree and John Brown and a host of other young receivers, or they're returning with a host of other young receivers like Chris Moore. A healthy Joe Flacco and I know this is debatable. People are saying, this is ridiculous to say that Lamar Jackson is going to push anybody, but Joe Flacco is a lot better when under pressure. And I think that's what you're seeing signs of now. Yes, a healthy Joe Flacco. He's looking great in camp. He's looking crisp. It looks like his deep ball is back. It's really, the question is whether Lamar Jackson or RG3 is going to be the primary backup. Now, Lamar Jackson is expected to be on the field with some small sub packages, probably trick plays here and there. But are they confident enough to go with Lamar Jackson and just Lamar Jackson in that backup role? Or are they going to hold on to RG3, who is also looking very good in camp? So, and granted, no pads are on yet. This is all without pads. So once we put the pads on in training camp, we get to see competition against other teams in the preseason games. That'll tell. That'll tell. But I'm looking at the Ravens to make the postseason. Even with that abysmal play that they had last year, they almost made the postseason, except for the last play of the game in Week 17. And the 49-yard touchdown that the defense gave up to the Cincinnati Bengals. But I think that they will make it back to the playoffs. It'll probably be another 2 teams coming out of the North.
Well, Baltimore, Blaine, it's Mark Hirsch. I certainly wasn't surprised how the Ravens got knocked out last year because their defense has been the staple of the team. So, anything can happen. I was as surprised as anybody, and especially against the Bengals. I think that one of the points you hit on, and I'm going to take the opposite tack, you said a healthy Joe Flacco, and I'm wondering what the odds are that he's going to be able to stay healthy because he's had to deal with so many back injuries and knee injuries and all the rest of it. I wonder what's going to happen when he really gets out there and starts to play. And I think you're right. I think it depends on Joe Flacco. They seem to, as you said, look a lot better on paper, and they've been practicing with the pads off, and everybody looks good, but usually they do anyway. And, the season's not on yet. So at least we're not having the preseason injuries where somebody turns around and blows out an ACL just trying to sit down or something. But the Ravens have been injury prone in the past, so that's something that's going to be in their favor if they can avoid the injuries. Obviously, it's going to add to the abilities of the team. I think a real good pick for them was getting Michael Crabtree. I think he's going to help them a lot. I think they needed some help at wide receiver, so that bodes well for them. And I think it's a little early to be saying people are having their best off season in memory and this kind of stuff. Let's wait until the real training camps start. Don't you think, Chris Rose?
Yeah, I'll give it over to Blaine in a second, but I want to just jump in and say that, I love how this time of year everyone's always saying, he looks better than I've ever seen him. He looks thinner. He looks stronger. He can jump a building in a single bound. He's faster than a speeding bullet. This guy really shows that he came back ready to play. I mean, if you could just put that on repeat and then click it on every single team's page, and it's just the same thing. He really looks like he studied every. Oh gosh, he really came back. I was just so impressed with how he looked coming into camp. Yeah.
That's a football player.
Yeah. So I don't want to I just want to jump in. So let me let Mr. Hirsch finish his thought, and then I'll let you respond, Blaine.
Well, the only thing I was going to say that I didn't say already is RG3. You got to be kidding me. I can't see them hanging on to him. I don't know what his scheme fits into the salary cap, but I think that guy's history. Although he's got one of the greatest signal calling voices in all of football. But if he gets some playing time, the way that guy plays, he's probably going to injure himself and be out anyway. So I don't know what they're thinking. Maybe Baltimore Blaine can give me a clue about that, but that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, real quick, those 2 points that you hit on. One, I want to go back to the offensive line because I missed that. The offensive line was beat up along with Joe Flacco at the beginning of the year last year, and then they came together with subs on that offensive line. Now you got the starters coming back like Marshall Yanda, who was out all year last year, and he went out early. You have Alex Lewis, who in his rookie season made a splash at guard, left guard. So you're going to have those guys coming back. If that offensive line, which we look to be very much improved this year, protects Joe Flacco, yes, there's no reason why Joe Flacco can't stay healthy. Also, with the RG3 situation, you hit on a very good point. If he can stay healthy, this guy, don't forget how good he was when he was healthy. And he's been accident prone, injury prone. As far as the Ravens salary situation or their cap situation with him, he is on a very friendly cap signing. They can actually just cut him straight out of camp and not hardly lose anything on him. He's on a very friendly contract. But I think that the thing with RG3 is if he's healthy and with this line being improved and all the injuries coming back, you got Ronnie Stanley at left tackle. You added Orlando Brown at right tackle. You have, like I said, Marshall Yanda back at right guard. You're going to have a much improved line. They're going to be protected. Not to mention that running game is going to flourish from that as well. So that gives you even more protection for when you have a good running game for the quarterback.
Well, there's no doubt that the fact that your subs stepped forward in the last season and got a lot of playing experience, and now some of the guys that were injured are coming back on the O-line, is going to give you a lot of depth, and I think that's got to be a plus as well, having some depth in the offensive line. But I'll say my final answer on RG3 is, for him, it's not even a question of protection or anything else. The guy is reckless. That's all I could say. When I watched him play, when he was on the Redskins, I knew he was going to get hurt. He's reckless and puts himself in jeopardy over and over again.
Well, I just like to say before Chris comes in, I just like to say that you're right, and Chris made a good point too. I agree with what Chris said about it's too early in camp, and this guy looks great. This guy I'm with you on that, Chris. I hate that. But being where we are and what we're talking about at this point in time, we have to address it that way. And I think that with RG3, I think the thing to watch out for if he sticks on the team past the cuts is how Marty Morningweg has him adjusting to playing in that offense. Is he going to still be reckless? Have they addressed that? So it's a very good point, Mr. Hirsch, that he has been reckless in the past. But that's been one of the talking points I know on Baltimore radio is that just how they're looking at Lamar Jackson to how he can look at RG3 and know not what to do as a young quarterback. And to the point where they make it sound like that RG3 has matured in that area where he's not making these reckless decisions.
Yeah, I think you guys are making a little too much about RG3. Because what he really is now is just a camp arm. He's one of those. Excuse me. He's a Ryan Mallett. He's a who else am I thinking of? The litany of quarterbacks that jump around from camp to camp to camp. Mark Sanchez at the higher end of these guys. And, you need to have some arms there so your stars aren't throwing the ball so much. They throw their arms out. At the same time, they're competing for a possible, third spot. The only reason RG3 hits the radar is just because of the potential. But at this point, he's just one of those guys that might get bounced around to a camp or two, might stick as a third quarterback, might not. So I wouldn't look too much into that. Just to jump into what you're saying about about the team and the offensive line, I think something else that really is going to take a step up is going to be the defense, because you have that great rookie out in the corner. You have some people that had a chance to really play together last year. have some younger guys like Mr. Hirsch was saying that had a chance to step up. I think that they're going to have a little more of a cohesive feel, a little more experience for some of the young guys, and have a little more experience playing together. I think that's going to go a long way for them. So I'm in the affirmative category that I think the Ravens will find a spot this year.
Well, that on that defense also, let's not forget that they're under a new defensive coordinator, Don Wink Martindale. And according to the defensive players, they love this guy. Sort of like that camaraderie, that coach love, that coach player relationship that Rex Ryan had when he was in Baltimore. They loved Rex Ryan, and they like Martindale because one of the things that they point out is he's more aggressive. And the one problem, if you look at the Ravens back over the last couple of seasons, they've lost games late in the season because of their conservative play on defense. Late games with the Steelers 2 years ago, with the Bengals last year, and then there was another one the year before that they coughed up late inning or late inning late game touchdowns or scores. You go back all the way back to the 2013 season when the defense gave up 15, what was it? I'm sorry, two 14-point leads to the Patriots in the playoffs and lost that game. So that's something that I'm interested to see, and I'm excited to see is how this defense plays under this new scheme and how aggressive they are and how effective they are.
Well, another team that has quarterback health issues that are going to depend on how the season goes and are going to dictate how the season goes and have new faces on the defense and new defensive scheme is your team, Mr. Hirsch, the Green Bay Packers. So why don't you give us a breakdown on the Packers, who every year are picked to get in, but obviously it's usually health or with a couple of other things. It's almost always just can Aaron Rodgers stay on the field. So what do you see going into the 2018 season?
Well, it's true that the Packers have, been in the playoffs for 8 seasons in a row prior to Aaron Rodgers' collarbone injury. And even the season he was out one other time, they managed to squeak in. But I think the Packers have a whole lot of good things happening for them now. They've got a great couple of new cornerbacks, one of which is Jaire Alexander, and he was looking good in camp. And Mike Daniels is going to be on the defense. They got an outside linebacker who's new, Reggie Gilbert, who the Packers are really high on. He had a strong showing, consistently getting after the quarterback. And I know Coach McCarthy's very happy with him. Aside from that, you've got all the rest of the package that the Packers have been putting together. They've had a great offseason in terms of not only the draft, when they traded down and then traded up again. They got a couple of great guys. I already mentioned Jaire Alexander. Well, there's also Josh Jackson. In free agency, they picked up Jimmy Graham. They re-signed Tramon Williams. I mean, a lot of good things are happening for the Packers. And I would be very surprised, ruling out some kind of major catastrophe to one of the key players if they didn't make it back into the playoffs. They're working hard. Their new guys are looking good. What can I say?
Well, I like the Packers. I like the chances of getting back just for the reasons you said. You also have Muhammad Wilkerson being signed as well for that defense. I think if Roger stays healthy, and that's the key, is staying healthy. I don't think that there will be a contract distraction there at all. I just don't see this team being affected by that. I believe that they will make the playoffs. And but what do you think as far as keeping him protected on that offensive line, Mr. Hirsch?
Well, that's been a sore spot, and they've got some new offensive linemen, and they've got some of the other guys returning. I think, I hate to say it, but I think that Brian Balaga is reaching the end of his days. He seems to get hit or hurt, I should say, every season, either his ankles or his legs, and he's been out almost more than he's been in. But there's some talent there as well. David Bakhtiari is one of the best, and they've got a whole bunch of guys that they're going to be able to pick and choose from and try to assemble a good offensive line. And I think they got the possibilities of having some depth there. Another factor that I think is going to play well for the Packers is that Coach McCarthy has decided that he's not going to go with one running back. He's going to have running back by committees. So what that means is that he's going to have Ty Montgomery, he's going to have Aaron Jones, and he's going to have Jamal Williams. And the reason I think that's a good plan is because as the season progresses, let's say they all get healthy and they're all doing well, there's going to be an opportunity for being able to figure out what the strengths and the weaknesses of each one of these guys are, which is going to make it much better for choosing one or the other for situational stuff. Ty Montgomery used to be a wide receiver. He's good coming out of the leaking out of the side there to get a little extra action there to distract from the tight ends, even if he's not getting the ball. So I think that's a good plan. Also, the fact that if somebody's getting injured, you got three guys that they're putting in rotation, next man up. So also, they have a fullback, Ripkowski. And anybody who's familiar with the Packers knows that when there's a short yardage, third down or something like this, and you see that fullback in there, they're going to go for it because of Kuhn, who did this over and over and over again for many seasons, and Ripkowski is the guy that's taken his place. The other thing about the Packers that I think is worth mentioning, and I'm just going to mention it and then turn it over to Chris, is the changes in the front office. Brian Gutekunst came in. He's the new general manager, and he's done a good job. He's more aggressive than Ted Thompson is. I think it was a brilliant play the way he worked the draft to get two premier cornerbacks, which are badly needed by the team. And then you've got the signing of Mike Pettin, who's revamping the defense. And the defense has been a sore spot for the Packers for a long time. So I think that those are some significant improvements.
I think it's going to be really important for the Packers to start fast. I'm not the biggest fan of Pettin. I know he was good as the D coordinator under Rex, but that was Rex's defense, and since then he really hasn't done too much. But he is aggressive. He has worked on successful programs, so it is possible that he can bring something to him. The reason I mentioned the fast start is those rookie corners, some of the other guys who've been in that Capers system for a long time. You have a lot of people who haven't played together or are brand new to the league or adjusting to a new system, all kind of going at it at the same time. That could be a little bit rough at the very beginning. So but when you have Aaron Rodgers, that can outshine. But just a little devil's advocate, I think that definitely if they stay even somewhat healthy, they'll get into the playoffs and be one of those teams that was out last year that gets back in. Blaine, you wanted to jump in on that?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up some. Well, first of all, Mike Pettin, being familiar with him from when he was with the Ravens and Rex Ryan. He was under that aggressive Rex Ryan defense as a defensive coach there. So it doesn't surprise me that that's his schooling. That's his MO is to be aggressive. So I think that's going to really work out well for. I just like aggressive defenses. But I wanted to ask Mr. Hirsch. We talked about Aaron Rodgers staying healthy. But God forbid what happens if he goes down. Are you confident in Deshaun Kaiser?
Kaiser.
Yeah, are you confident in the backup situation between Hunley
Well,
and Kaiser?
I just hope that they go with Kaiser instead of Hunley. And my reason is he had his chance and he didn't rise to the occasion. And I would like to hope that Kaiser would be more adequate as a backup than Hunley ever was. And I would also hope that he would stay a part of the team for a while. I don't even know why Hunley is still on the team. I guess you got to have three guys this early so you could play them off each other. But I was very disappointed with Brett Hundley, and I'm looking to see something better out of Kaiser. And then they've got a fourth guy hanging around, Joe Callahan, who I got to watch in the preseason, and he didn't look good at all. So I don't know what their plan is. It seems to me that they seem to have a team culture of being very loyal to their players, and they seem to be giving Brett Hundley every possible opportunity to advance ahead of Kaiser. And I wish they just cut that out and start working Kaiser as the number two guy.
Yeah, well, we're not in camp, so we never know if maybe one guy can't outshine the other. That can always happen. It's easier for us, being out here to say, hey, I like this guy better from what little bit I've seen, but they're seeing him every day. That's kind of what we're going to try and look into going forward. Is those reports, as much as we can believe those reports, telling us what's actually going on in camp and in these some of these battles. So stay tuned for that. Let's change gears a little bit and go to the other side of a couple of teams on the five that were picked to be knocked out. And I'd say let's go to the easiest one for me. I'm not sure. I'll go to Mr. Hirsch, and then we'll get Baltimore Blaine's pick on this. But I think Buffalo Bills really shocked a lot of people by getting in to the playoffs last year. I think a lot of that was from their defense, but also the play of Tyrod Taylor, who they got rid of. Now you have A.J. McCarron and Nathan Peterman, who had one of the worst first games I've ever seen a quarterback have last year when they put him in. They benched Tyrod for no reason and put in Peterman. And I think he threw like 5 picks in his first 5 possessions, something crazy like that against the Chargers. So, yeah, to me, I mean, I can go through a list of reasons. Giving the coach way too much power and him being a bad GM on the way down to getting rid of Tyrod Taylor. I think Bills are, to me, the easiest one. ESPN disagrees, but I think that they're, to me, the easiest one that they should get knocked out.
Well, I think the Bills are back in rebuilding mode, especially after they dealt Tyrod Taylor out of there. They've got Josh Allen, one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. But come on, these new guys, it takes them a while to get acclimated to the NFL. Everything's happening at hyper speed there. They need to learn how to do their reads quickly so they could get rid of the ball and not get sacked in the backfield. It's just a mess. They do have A.J. McCarron, who I always thought was a better quarterback than the guy he sat behind for a long time. But I don't know what the Bills are thinking. I think they're definitely not thinking about 2018 by the way they're acting. And I think they're in rebuilding mode. And I don't expect them to get into the playoffs by any stretch of the imagination.
I'm going to make it unanimous. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, and I agree with you. I think they're in a rebuilding mode. As far as AJ McCarron is concerned, I'm in a show me state of mind with him. We haven't seen anything from him other than limited amount of snaps with the Bengals behind the red rifle. And he looked good at times, but I'm not sure that he is the answer to this team. Like you said, they did draft Josh Allen, and I suspect it's going to take at least half a season before we see anything effective from him. I expect the Bills to be a heavy run team. If you can stop the run, you can stop the Bills. Now they have LaShawn McCoy coming back. They have Patrick DeMarco. Um, well, yeah, I mean Chris Ivory. I mean Chris Ivory. Um, but if you can stop the run, you'll be able to stop this team. I just don't see them being effective, especially they're in a weak division to begin with. So maybe that's going to help them out. But with the Jets improving, the Patriots being who they are, Miami, you never know. Yeah, you never know where they're going to fall on the scale. So it's going to be even in a weak division. I just don't feel it with the Bills.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty much that says it all. I mean, their defense is pretty good, but yeah, I just don't see it going on with the Bills. They are in the AFC East, which is going to continue to be a weak division. It's still I don't see it happening. So here's one that's a little bit more tricky. They have the Kansas City Chiefs as number 4, and I think the Kansas City Chiefs are one of the most talented teams, top to bottom, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, the big question is Patrick Mahomes. Now, we've seen a couple of rookies take their teams to the playoffs. We've seen more second-year quarterbacks really excel, even going to the Super Bowl in recent years. This guy kind of falls in between. I know it's really hard to make a prediction given that we don't know, how he really looks in game situations. I mean, he had like a throwaway game last year, but I think that he has the right attitude from everything I've heard. Everything from how he treated Alex Smith as, being the fountain of knowledge and really paid respect and listened to everything he said, to the fact that he refused all endorsement deals, saying he wants to focus on football. And once he makes it and feels like he's playing, then he'll start worrying about that stuff. I mean, the kid just kind of exudes what a good young star should be. So I'm kind of on the fence here. I'm actually going to jump in. Talk about the Chiefs here. I'm kind of jumping in with the fact that I have another team that I'm going to mention. I think was laid off this list. I think it's going to knock the Chiefs out, but I think the Chiefs are kind of on the fence. Mr. Hirsch, I know you're a big fan of Mahomes.
Well, I like the looks of Patrick Mahomes, but you got to understand that the Chiefs are snake bit with their head coach there, Andy Reid. He just never seems to get things completely right. And when you look at the kind of offense that they were running with Alex at the helm, they're going to have to totally revamp their offense because Mahomes is a totally different kind of quarterback than Alex Smith was. And, I think that's a big factor because he's more mobile in the pocket. As far as running in the by the quarterback, Alex Smith, he'd have to put a firecracker in his pants before he'd move out of the pocket. And Mahomes is much more mobile. He likes to take the ball and run with it. And I think that's a completely different offense. And in order for them to capitalize on that, they're going to have to change a lot about their offense. And I'm just wondering if that's the way they're thinking, or they're just going to plug them in and expect them to run the same kind of dink and dunk offense that Alex Smith ran.
Well, I'm on the fence with you as far as the Chiefs are concerned. Now, one thing I want to point out about Patrick Mahomes, his offseason hasn't been very well. He's been throwing a ton of interceptions, and this is without pads on this offseason. So he's not making a very good show in camp this offseason. And yeah, we have time to iron all that out before we start to play meaningful football. But it's always hard when you have a rookie take over for a veteran, and as you said, Mr. Hirsch, changing the system, changing two different type of quarterbacks. All I can say is they still have Kareem Hunt, and they still have Tyreek Hill. You know,
Travis
Demarcus,
Kelsey.
Demarcus Robinson, Sammy Watkins. I mean, you still have a cast of characters. You've improved the defense. It's going to come down to that play, to that quarterback play. I don't think he's going to tank. I think he's going to. I, for one, think he's going to straighten it out. He looked good last season in the preseason. We'll see how this preseason goes and whether or not he can right the ship. But I don't know about that division. I don't know if I would put my money on them making the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's the thing for me. So besides the team I kind of teased that I'm going to bring up later on, let's go to a team that I have been high on, and ESPN also picked to go to the playoffs. And I think someone that going to have a little too much for the Chiefs, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers. Um, you know, Mr. Hurst likes to get on me because I was so big on them last year, but they had some injuries at the beginning of the season, and they had probably the worst. I know I like to complain about my Seahawks kicking and how that, they are 2 games, a kicker from 2 games away. They would have gone to the playoffs easy. The Chargers, I mean, that guy missed like 2 or 3 at the end of one game and missed the others. They changed kickers. They really got together, and they won. They went 0-4, including with those 3 kicker games. And then they finished the season 6-1. That's a big turnaround. They have a couple of the best corners in the league. The one the Pack let go, and Hayward. Joey Bosa is an absolute animal. Ingram and Bosa make one of the best pass rushing tandems in the league. They got stronger on defense. They got some more weapons in there as far as the receivers go, on top of the receivers they already had. They got Gus Bradley coming over from Jacksonville, and it usually takes a good 2 years for a new defensive system to really take hold. So Gus had last year and this year he's got his guys in. I think you're going to see that defense really start to fly around. And so, yes, I do pick them every year. I missed by 1 game last year, and I think that's a good not policy. What am I looking for? I did a good job as far as putting all the pieces together. Just didn't quite hit on the field. But I think the Chargers are going to go, and I think that's going to be one of the 2 teams that's going to make it. So Mahomes isn't going to get in this year. Mr. Hirsch?
Well, I, for one, I'm tired of all this talk about these great teams that don't go anywhere because their kicker missed a kick. Because from my way of thinking, if you're in a situation where 3 points or a point after is going to make the difference in whether you win or lose, you're not really ahead of the game, because you should be farther ahead if you're really this great team. And I don't have much faith in the Chargers. I mean, I know that, Chris, you've been high on them for the last 2 seasons, and now you're high on them into this 3rd one. And I was joking with you earlier. I said, just hang with it. Sooner or later, you'll hit. And maybe this is the year. I mean, they're in kind of a freaky division there, where it's really hard to say what's going to happen there, in my estimation, because you've got a lot of changes throughout the rest of the division. And one of the points that's brought up in the article is that the Chargers are a team that has a lot of continuity coming into the next season, that they don't really have a lot of dramatic changes there. So I think that bodes well for them. I've always questioned Phillip Rivers, whether he had the right stuff to actually lead a team. He seems to do okay until he loses the game. And, I need to see him step up and become a winner. I think that's important, and it's one of the reasons why I am happy about the Broncos taking Case Keenum, because he's proved himself to be a winner. And Phillip Rivers has never proved anything in my mind. So we'll see. Blaine? While Blaine figures out his mute button's on.
Microphone's on. Microphone's on. Go ahead. Finish up.
Sorry about that.
No, take it away, Blaine.
Okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna ride on that. I'm gonna ride with you on the Phillip Rivers thing. That's going to be the key to this team. Whether Phillip Rivers is, whether he takes care of the ball. He gets. We were talking about a little earlier about RG3 getting reckless, playing recklessly, in his younger years. Phillip Rivers is what is it going into his 14th year or something like that? And he's still playing reckless with the ball. Now he cut down on turnovers last year, and as we stated earlier, this team just missed the playoffs. I have picked them over the last 2 seasons to be in the playoffs, and I've missed. And if you're a Chargers fan, you don't want me to pick them again, but I'm leaning towards picking them again one more time. But it always comes down to Phillip Rivers. Whether or not Phillip Rivers can keep his cool and not make a stupid judgment call and cost them a game. And so, I mean, they have a good defense. He has good weapons. It's just that I don't. That's the one guy on a team. There's always like a guy on each team I don't trust, and this is the guy on this team that I don't trust.
All right. Well, we I guess agree to disagree. I haven't really heard from you guys if you think they're going in or not, but I obviously think that team's going in. So let's look at the team that was unanimously picked by the writers at ESPN that they are not going back to the playoffs, and that's the Tennessee Titans. I'm not sure I agree with this. I don't understand why they're coming down so hard. I do agree. We're going to talk about the Texans next. I do think that that the Texans, are looking really strong and they have a good chance to make it. But I can't see why the Tennessee Titans would be unanimous votes to not make the wild card. I think that you keep getting stronger as far as weapons around Mariota. I think getting that backfield tandem that they have this year is going to be huge. I think their defense, as far as some of the new players they've picked up, are just making the team stronger and stronger every single year. I don't see them taking too much of a step back. They had a serious problems on defense last year, especially in the secondary, and they've had a chance to really, fix that. I won't spend as much time on this team as we have on the others, but Mr. Hirsch, I think that the Tennessee Titans could be just fine as especially considering the AFC is kind of weak. I think they could take maybe Buffalo's spot and hold that spot or hold their own spot in the wild card.
Well, I have to disagree with you there, and I'm going to go with the writers. I think they made a good point that the AFC South might be the strongest division in the AFC, and that some of the more powerhouse teams in there. I mean, look at the Texas and look at Indianapolis. You got Deshaun coming back. You got Andrew Luck is throwing in camp. I think there's going to be a lot of competition there, and I don't think there's room for the Titans in the playoff picture when all is said and done. So I'm going to say no to the Titans.
Well, I'm going to take issue with calling them the strongest division in the AFC, but they're going to be one of the most competitive as far as having 4 teams in that division that are competing against each other to win that division. I don't trust Jaguars because I don't trust Bortles, so I could see them not making it back. I do like the Texans. I do see them having a real good chance of making it. And then if you're going to look at that division and say only one team is coming out of it, then I would say Tennessee probably is that team that's not going to come out of it. And I just don't know. Their defense, I think, is going to be improved. Although Dean Pease is there now as a defensive coordinator, and I don't like that conservative defense that he throws out there in late games, late in games. So they definitely have enough talent on that team to make it, but I can actually see them. Yeah, I can see them getting bumped out if the Texans are playing strong.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that. I think the Jaguars are the second best team in the AFC, personally.
Ooh.
But
Ooh.
I mean, last year they were head and shoulders better than pretty much everywhere except the Patriots as the season came to an end. I mean, no one could really do anything on that defense. But talking about that division, I definitely think you guys had good points. My objection was just the fact that it's 22 of 22 and put them as the number one team, most unlikely above the Bills. That to me seemed a little bit strange. But being in their division, excuse me, does make sense. So let's go to the Texans. And I think what we saw Deshaun do at the end of last year or in the middle of the year when he got to play was just, it's never been done before. I mean, period. They were averaging almost 40 points a game with him under center. There was nothing game plan wise you can do to stop what he was doing. He ran roughshod over everybody. And you have a couple of wide receivers that can do a lot. You have some new guys that they added to the team. And then on defense, you got JJ coming back. You got Tyrann Mathieu added to the team. I think that team looks dangerous. Mr. Hirsch?
Well, the key to this is health, and I agree with the ESPN writers about that. But I also agree with you. I think that the Titans, on paper, they look great, and based on the limited performance we saw out of the quarterback, Deshaun Watson, last year, before he was injured, I think that it's a good bet that he's going to be a real player, and he's going to take them far. The defense is good. So, yeah, I agree. And they got 21 votes out of 22 to make it into the playoffs. So I think everybody's kind of on the same page with that, unless my friend from Baltimore disagrees.
All I'm going to say is, again, don't underestimate defensive coordinators in this league. Deshaun Watson played 7 games last year before getting injured. Defensive coordinators have had a full season now to plan against this guy. They have tape on him. They can, they can study him. They know his strengths. They know what he did to put up 30 points plus per a game last season. Don't expect another season like last season from Deshaun Watson, especially coming off an ACL, a second ACL. He's got now torn ACL in both legs. So I'm not going to put my money. I'm going to wait on this team. I'm leaning towards this team for the reasons you guys have said. Good defense. You've got an improved defense. You got weapons on that offense, and DeAndre Hopkins is there coming back. Hard to defend, but I'm not going to put my money on them yet because this team, this league adjusts fast. And Chris, just to backtrack a little bit, you really want to put your money on Blake Bortles to have another stellar year?
Oh, he looked good, Blaine. He looked good in the playoffs. You can't deny that.
Well, Mr. Hirsch has something to say. I'll just say quickly. Blake Bortles didn't have a stellar year. That defense was just, you couldn't score on them. And they have Fournette. That's why they won. So they don't need Bortles to have a stellar year. So Mr. Hirsch wants to jump back in. Yeah, Mr. Hirsch had a response to what you just said.
Go ahead. Yeah, and I agree that he didn't look good in the season, but he looked pretty good in the playoffs. So what I wanted to ask Baltimore Blaine is, do you think that the defensives have a little bit of tape on Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, some of the other guys that have been successful year after year? Do you really think that that's that big of an issue? And also, if the defenses are going to adjust, aren't the offenses going to as well?
The defense adjusts, and then the offense adjusts to what the defense's adjustments are. The thing about that list of quarterbacks, they are proven. They have already been proven to be elite quarterbacks, superstars. Deshaun Watson's played 7 games. And I'll say the same about Garoppolo in San Francisco. We have a tendency to jump on the new guy, and get all, flustered with his, with something magical, because we want something magical. We all want to see that next superstar. We want to see that next Tom Brady, that next Unitas. We want to see that next Gale Sayers, Barry Sanders type of player. And I mean, that's normal, but I'm one that says, give me more than 7 games before I'm going to jump on his wagon, and give it a year or two before, I crown him to be anything. I remember when RG3, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, that's a good example. RG3 was, touted as one of the best in the league in his rookie year. And of course he got hurt, but then, he hasn't done anything since. So I'm just saying that I want to wait on this.
Yeah, I'll just counter that by saying I think that you look at Nick Foles, you look at people in certain systems, and you start to see tendencies. Moving to your left, moving to your right, having problems. I think that what he brings to the table is kind of scheme proof, but I guess time will tell. We can talk about that more during the season. Let's go to that team, because I agree with you, Blaine. I think the people are way too high on the Niners, having them done so very little. I think they ran the table at the end, but I don't think that they deserve to be on this list and on everybody's list. Is all of these guys are going to go? These guys are going to take over. Rams, watch out. These guys are just going to run roughshod. He's going to keep going and be undefeated again. I think that they're a super talented team. They're building the right way. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with for a long time. But I think they're going to have some serious stumbling blocks when the season comes. And I think Jimmy G and what they're doing is something that the defensive coordinators can take a little more of a chunk out of, rather than what I see as a superstar talent. So, I mean, Mr. Hirsch, I know you're big on the Niners, and you think that this year they're really going to turn the corner.
Well, I definitely think that the Niners are on the rise. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And, they've got some returning defensive players from injury. They got Jimmy Garoppolo. I know that Blaine has said time and again that they have tape on him now, but he was raised up in a good system under Belichick and Tom Brady, and I think he's very capable, and it's a chance for him to prove what he's worth. And the 49ers are in an interesting division, because you got the Rams in there, and each of these teams is going to play each other 2 times during the year. The teams are in the same division. So the 49ers are going to have to go up against the Rams, which are going to be very tough. And then they got a couple of other teams in the division that are maybe not going to be so tough. You've got the rebuilding Seahawks that, have been preeminent in that division for a long time. Not last year, but prior to that, they've always been in there. And I think that they're in a rebuilding phase and are not going to be as much of a threat. And then you've got the Cardinals that have been rebuilding for, over and over again for a really long time. So what I think is going to tell the tale to me of the 49ers' fortunes during the 2018 season is whether they can win 1 or 2 of those games that they have with the Rams.
I'm going to say Matt Castle, Ryan Mallett. What do they have in common? They came out of that New England Patriots system and have been mediocre at best. So, again, I'm going to stick behind what I said about and what you just mentioned about tape and giving the defensive coordinators a chance to adjust. Now, I believe in Garoppolo. I like Garoppolo. I think there's something special about him, but I'm not putting my money on him to be the next superstar in this league because I've seen how the league adjusts. And as far as the 49ers team is concerned, I think they are an upcoming team. I think they're on the rise. I think they've added some pieces there that over the last 2 seasons that have made them legitimate, even without Garoppolo. But as far as Garoppolo is concerned, again, 6 games with the 49ers, he looked very good. But I'm going to wait till mid-season and see if that starts to decline.
All right, so let's take the last two that are on the list here. One of them I didn't see when we originally talked about this list, but the last two teams on the list, as far as that are going to get knocked off, are both in the NFC South, and that is Carolina and Atlanta. You know, I want to get one other segment in here before we go, so I'm going to try and speed through just a little bit. I think Carolina, everyone knows I'm not the biggest fan of Carolina. Thomas Davis getting suspended is going to be a big deal. I love their rookie, the first-round rookie, and some of the pieces they have. I think that McCaffrey is going to make a big jump this year. I think that they can definitely do some damage and get in there. If they were in the AFC, I'd say they'd be a shoo-in for a possible wild card. But in the NFC, it might be a little bit tough. Again, I don't understand why they're at the very top. And Atlanta is at the bottom of that list, and I just completely disagree. I think Atlanta's going to be hanging around. I think they're going to be fine as long as they can get the contract situation with Julio set up. I think that defense is getting better and better, and I don't really see too much of a step back from that team. But I do got to say, I'm not 100% with Atlanta because it's a tough division, and the NFC is very tough. So I'd say that I understand why they're on the list, but that's a tough one for me to swallow in Atlanta. And Carolina is, I never get them right when I guess Carolina. Never, ever, ever do. Mr. Hirsch?
Well, let's start with Carolina, and notably, they got 22 votes out of 22, just like the Titans. So these sports writers are basically casting the Carolina Panthers in the same breath as the Tennessee Titans. And I think there's a couple of things that are going on with the Panthers that are going to make it difficult for them because you talk about making adjustments. Well, they're getting all new offensive scheme put in. They've got a new offensive coordinator. There's a bunch of new wide receivers. And, really it's going to be up to Cam Newton to adjust because he's going to have a lot of adjusting to do on his plate. Now, the Atlanta Falcons, one of the things that the sports writers are touting here, and they only got 9 votes out of 22. And because the next persons on the list had less, they ended up on this list, and they need to have, how many was it, 5 on each of the going to come to the playoffs or go off of the playoffs. So here the Falcons are. They make a big deal in the article about the brotherhood of the players and the Julio Jones not signing and all the rest of that stuff. But I have to agree with you, Chris. I think the Falcons are strong. I think that this contract dispute with Julio Jones is going to work itself out. And I think they're going to be basically a threat. And I think that the division itself is one of the toughest divisions in all of football. So that's where the rub comes in is how many are you going to get a division winner and a wild card out of the NFC South? I think if you do, I think one of them is probably going to be the Falcons or the Saints. It's one or the other is going to be the winner of the division. One or the other is going to be a potential wild card. So I don't necessarily agree that the Falcons should be on this list. And having said that, and if we have time to talk about it later, I think there's some teams that should have been on at least the list of going to the playoffs that weren't even included. Blaine?
Yeah, I'm going to go with, as far as Carolina is concerned, DJ Moore, I think, is going to be, watch out. Him and the addition of Torrey Smith, you got both of those guys on the field at the same time. And Cam Newton, that offense is going to be treacherous. I mean, as far as defenses are concerned. As far as Atlanta is concerned, you still have Matt Ryan, you know, looking, you know, the what was he, MVP 2 years ago? Then you have the running backs, the two-headed running attack, Coleman and Freeman, and I think that it's hard to pick between the two. And I agree with you that this is one of the most competitive and strongest divisions in the league, because you have the Saints there, you have these two teams, and then you have who else is in that division? Well, Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay is going to improve, although it really depends on whether or not the quarterback is going to be a head case again this year. But I can't. I'm really leaning towards Carolina to have a better year than Atlanta this year. But I'm going to wait and get into camp to get into the specifics of that.
All right, yeah. So I think that's we all got some good points there, and that will lead us into future shows. We're kind of squishing at the end here because we want to get into a quick segment on teams that we thought were left out. And someone that we love on this show is Case Keenum. And I think that the Broncos, with the Chiefs having a young quarterback, with Case Keenum being in charge there now, they still have those great wide receivers. Manny and DT are coming back. They don't have the full no-fly zone anymore, but that defense is still, not anything to shake a stick at. They can still put together a top 10 defensive effort. I don't think that would surprise too many people. You still got Von Miller there. So I think that Denver might have been left off this list as a team that could get on the board in the playoffs this next year. Hirsch, any thoughts on the Broncos? You got someone you want to bring up?
Yeah, no, I love the Broncos, and I think that the way this is going to play out is it's going to be Broncos in, Chargers out, because there's only going to be room for so many playoff teams, and sometimes you don't even get a wild card out of every division. So I'm definitely high on the Broncos, and I think they're going to finish higher than the Chargers. And just to refer back to that last segment, I think that Blaine hit on something. I think that it's going to be for sure the Saints in the playoffs, and whether it's Atlanta or Carolina, there's not room for both of them. And that's all I'll say. But I'm high on Denver, and I think Case Keenum can do something with this team.
Categories.
I'm going along with that too. I really like the Broncos just to turn it around and get back to the playoffs this year under Case Keenum.
All right. Well, we'll look at that when we do our division by division breakdown coming up next month. But I think this article gave us something fun to talk about, and I enjoyed it. So for Mr. Mark Hirsch and Mr. Baltimore Blaine, check us out at Spreaker.com/NuckPods to find all the stuff that we do, as well as at NuckPods on both Facebook and Twitter. And don't forget to catch us every Tuesday on Mancini Sports at blogtalkradio.com. So till next time, folks.
What about our email address?
Our email address is knuckleheadpods@gmail.com. So you can always send us stuff there too. So yeah, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much.